Good news, my mother announced, clapping her hands once like she was about to start a meeting. Every head in my shop turned toward her. You're transferring the business to your brother. For a moment, nobody said anything. Mike was standing near the lift with a clipboard in his hand. One of the newer guys had a wrench halfway to a bolt and just froze there. Jess looked up from the office doorway like she wasn't sure she'd heard that correctly. And my older brother Daniel stood behind our mother with his arms crossed and a small, satisfied smile on his face, like the whole thing had already been decided. I remember staring at my mom for a few seconds, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "Mom," I said slowly, "what are you talking about?" She walked further into the shop like she owned the place. Like this was her announcement to make. "I talked to Daniel," she said. "We've all agreed this is the best thing for the family." Behind her, Daniel shrugged slightly, that same smug half-smile still sitting on his face. If you've ever had a sibling who was the golden child growing up, you probably know that smile. The one that says they've already won. Mike looked from my mom to me, clearly trying to figure out if this was some kind of weird joke. Boss?" he said carefully. "It's not happening," I said. My mother stopped walking. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then irritation. "What do you mean it's not happening?" she asked. I said, "this is my company." She waved her hand like I had just said something childish. "Don't be dramatic." The room had gone completely quiet by that point. Even the air compressor had shut off. Every single person in that building was now pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. My mother turned slightly so everyone could hear her. "You built this because your father helped you," she said, which was technically true. My father had loaned me $5,000 12 years ago when I started the company. I had paid him back within 18 months, with interest. But my mother had a special talent for editing history. So naturally, she continued, it belongs to the family. Daniel finally spoke. "We're not saying you get nothing," he added, like he was doing me a favor. My jaw tightened. "You're saying I give you the business." Daniel shrugged again. "You'll still work there." That was the moment Mike quietly lowered his clipboard, because now even he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was insane. Jess stepped halfway out of the office. "Is this the meeting?" she asked. Daniel laughed softly. "Something like that." I rubbed my forehead. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "we are not doing this here." She crossed her arms. "Why not?" "Because this is my workplace. And I'm your mother." That sentence landed in the air like it was supposed to settle the entire argument. Like it was some kind of legal authority. "Let's step outside," I said. She didn't move. Instead, she turned back toward the shop floor. "Everyone should hear this," she said loudly. "It affects their jobs." That got my attention instantly. "What are you talking about?" She pointed at the building around us. "This company will be run differently under Daniel." A couple of the guys exchanged looks. Mike raised an eyebrow slowly. Daniel finally pushed himself off the wall and stepped forward. He looked around the shop like he was inspecting his new property. "We'll probably streamline some things," he said casually. Jess blinked. "You don't work here," she said. Daniel smiled at her. "Not yet." That was the moment my patience snapped. "Outside," I said firmly. My mother opened her mouth to argue. I pointed at the door. "Now." For a few seconds, she looked like she might keep going. Then she turned sharply and walked toward the office exit. Daniel followed her, still smiling. I looked at Mike. "Give us a few minutes." He nodded. "Take your time." Jess stepped back into the office, but not before giving me a look that said we were definitely talking about this later. I pushed the door open and stepped outside into the parking lot. My mother turned around immediately. "You embarrassed me in there," she said. I stared at her. "You walked into my business and announced you were giving it to Daniel. You didn't have to make a scene." I didn't make the scene. Daniel leaned against the side of my truck like he was just here for entertainment. "Look," he said, "we're trying to do this the easy way." "The easy way?" I laughed once. "You're trying to take my company. You'll still be involved." "In what way?" Daniel shrugged again. "You're good with the technical stuff." My stomach tightened. Because now the real picture was becoming clear. He didn't want the responsibility. He wanted the ownership. "So I do the work," I said slowly. "And you run it." That's usually how businesses work. I looked back at my mom. "You knew about this?" "Of course I knew." "And you thought the best way to discuss it was to ambush me in front of my employees?" She sighed dramatically. "If we talk privately, you would just say no." "That's because the answer is no." Daniel pushed off the truck. You haven't even heard the whole plan. I don't need to. Yes, you do. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Then he handed it to me. Daniel already spoke to an accountant, my mother said proudly. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't just notes. It was a basic outline. Ownership transfer. Management restructure. Projected profits. My name was on the page, but not under owner. Under operations manager. I stared at it. You're joking. Daniel shook his head. You'd still make good money. You mean the money from the company I built? Well, technically. I handed the paper back to him. This conversation is over. My mother's face hardened. You're being selfish. I almost laughed again. This company exists because I worked 16 hours a day for the first 3 years. That's what family businesses are. This isn't a family business. Yes, it is. No, I said. It's mine. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel sighed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. What part of no is confusing? My mother looked at me like I had just betrayed her personally. After everything we did for you. There it was. The guilt line. Classic. What exactly did you do for me? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed again, because even she knew the answer wasn't impressive. Daniel stepped forward. You wouldn't even have started the company without Dad's money. $5,000. It still counts. I paid it back. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point, my mother said sharply, is that Daniel needs this. And finally the real reason appeared. Why? I asked. Neither of them answered right away, which told me everything. Daniel looked at the ground briefly, then back at me. I've had some setbacks. Define setbacks. Business stuff. What business? He hesitated. My mother jumped in. He's been going through a difficult time. How difficult? Financially difficult. That's when the picture clicked together in my head. This wasn't about running my company. This was about saving Daniel from something. Are you in debt? I asked him. Daniel didn't answer. My mother did. It's temporary. How much? Again. Silence. And that silence told me something else. Something worse. This wasn't a small problem. This was a big one. I looked at Daniel. How much? I asked again. He rubbed the back of his neck. About $200,000. For a second I thought I'd heard him wrong. $200,000? It's complicated. I stared at him. Then I looked at my mother. And suddenly the entire plan made sense. They weren't trying to run my company. They were trying to use it. To dig Daniel out of a hole. You want my business to cover your debt? I said quietly. It wouldn't just cover it. My mother said quickly. The company makes great money. That was when the anger finally settled into something colder. You tried to take my company, I said, because Daniel owes $200,000. Language, my mother snapped. I shook my head slowly. No. My voice was calm now. Very calm. This conversation is finished. Daniel frowned. You're not even going to think about it. No. My mother stepped closer. You're abandoning your brother. No, I said. I'm refusing to let him bankrupt my company. Her eyes narrowed. You owe your family. I met her gaze. No. For the first time since she walked into the shop, my mother looked uncertain. Daniel didn't. His smile had disappeared, and the way he looked at me now told me something important. This wasn't the end of the conversation for him. Not even close. Because as they walked back to their car, he turned once more and said something that would end up causing a lot more trouble than either of us expected. You're going to regret this. For the rest of that afternoon, nobody in the shop asked me about what had just happened. Not directly, but the silence was different. The kind of silence where everyone is pretending they didn't just witness something extremely weird. Mike finished the inspection he'd been doing and eventually walked over to me. He didn't say anything for a moment, just leaned against the workbench. That your brother? He finally asked. Yeah. He nodded slowly. And he thinks he owns the place now? Apparently. Mike scratched his beard. Well, he said calmly, that's going to be awkward for him. That got a small laugh out of me. Jess stepped out of the office a few seconds later. Your mother called the front desk earlier, she said. My stomach tightened. When? About 20 minutes before she showed up. And she asked if Daniel could come by later this week to review operations. I closed my eyes for a second. So she was planning this. Jess nodded. She sounded confident. That word stuck with me. Confident. Like she thought it was already done. Like all of this was just a formality. Did you say anything? I asked. I told her you were busy. Good. Jess leaned against the doorframe. You want me to flag anything weird in the accounts? I looked at her. Why would there be something weird in the accounts? She shrugged. I don't know. But if someone thinks they're about to take over a business, sometimes they start acting like it. That sentence sat in my brain for a few seconds. Then something uncomfortable occurred to me. You still have the login history for the accounting software, right? Jess frowned slightly. Of course. Pull it. 5 minutes later, we were standing in the office looking at the activity log. Most of it was normal. Invoices, payroll entries, tax documents. Then Jess stopped scrolling. Wait. What? She pointed at the screen. There. 3 login attempts. 2 days ago. From an unfamiliar IP address. Do you recognize that location? She asked. I leaned closer. It wasn't the shop. It wasn't my house. It was somewhere across town. Who tried to log in? I asked. Jess clicked the entry. Then she looked at me. Your username. My stomach dropped slightly. That's not possible. I know. Maybe it was me on my phone or something. Jess shook her head. The system shows device signatures. This wasn't your phone. I felt that cold feeling creeping up the back of my neck. Was the password correct? No. How many tries? 3. Then the account locked. I leaned back in the chair slowly. Jess crossed her arms. Do you want the good news or the bad news? Start with the bad. Someone tried to log into your account. And the good? They didn't succeed. I rubbed my forehead. When did those attempts happen? Jess checked the timestamps again. Yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. Which meant one thing. Before the whole scene in the shop. Before my mother showed up with Daniel. Before the big announcement. Which meant someone had already been trying to access the company accounts. Change the passwords, I said immediately. Already doing it. And add 2-factor authentication. Done. Jess paused. Then looked at me carefully. You think this has something to do with your brother? I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But the timing felt uncomfortable. 2 days ago, the lottery story would have been coincidence. But this was different. Just lock everything down, I said. Jess nodded. Already ahead of you. She turned back to the computer. I'll also notify Sarah. Sarah? Our accountant. Right. Sarah handled all our tax filings and financial reporting. If anyone tries something weird with ownership documents or credit lines, she'll see it first, Jess said. Good. Jess hesitated for a moment. Then she asked the question I'd been avoiding. You really think they'd try something like that? I thought about Daniel's smile, the confidence in my mother's voice, the fact that they had shown up with a printed ownership plan. They already did, I said quietly. Jess didn't argue with that. The rest of the day passed normally, or at least as normally as possible after your family tries to take over your company in front of your employees. By 6 o'clock, most of the guys had gone home. Mike stayed behind to finish paperwork. I was locking up the tool cage when he walked over again. Everything okay? He asked. Define okay. He chuckled. Fair. Then his expression turned more serious. You know, if anyone tries to pull something with this place, we've got your back. That meant more than he probably realized. Thanks, I said. He nodded once. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. See you tomorrow, boss. Boss. That word felt important right then. Once everyone had left, I sat in the office for a while going over numbers. Not because I needed to, but because it helped me think. $200,000. That number kept repeating in my head. Daniel had always been bad with money. But $200,000 wasn't just bad decisions. That was disaster-level bad, which meant something else was going on. Something bigger. My phone buzzed on the desk. Daniel. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. What? You calmed down yet? He asked. I laughed once. You tried to take my company. We tried to help you. Help me. Running a business alone is stressful. I'm not alone. You know what I mean. No, I said. I really don't. He sighed. You're making this personal. It is personal. No, it isn't. You showed up at my workplace and told my employees you were taking over. That was Mom's idea. Of course it was. So you didn't want the business? I didn't say that. I leaned back in the chair. What exactly did you expect to happen today? I thought you'd listen. You thought I'd hand over my company. It wouldn't have been handing it over. You literally printed ownership transfer paperwork. That was just a starting point. Daniel. What? Did you try to log into my company accounts yesterday? There was a pause. Just a second. But it was enough. What are you talking about? He asked. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't. 3 login attempts. Silence again. Then he laughed. You're paranoid. Am I? Yes. So you didn't try? No. Did Mom? What? Did Mom try? That's ridiculous. Is it? Another pause. Then he said something that confirmed my suspicion. You should really change your passwords. My grip tightened on the phone. They're already changed. Good. Daniel. What? If I find out you try to access my accounts. You won't. I will. You're overreacting. No, I said quietly. I'm being careful. He sighed again. You're acting like we're criminals. I thought about the login attempts, the printed ownership plan, the surprise takeover announcement. Then stop acting like criminals, I said. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he said something else. Something that made my stomach tighten again. You know this problem isn't going away, right? What problem? Mine. I waited. 200,000 doesn't disappear, he continued. No, I said. It doesn't. And if I don't solve it. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because suddenly the situation felt much bigger than a stupid family argument. This wasn't just about entitlement anymore. This was about desperation. And desperate people sometimes make very bad decisions. Daniel, I said slowly. What? You need to fix your own mess. I'm trying. No, I replied. You're trying to make it mine. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said something quietly. You're going to wish you helped me. And before I could respond, he hung up. The next morning started normally, which, in hindsight, should have made me suspicious. Nothing explodes immediately after someone says, you're going to regret this. Real problems usually take a day or two to start moving. By 8 o'clock, the shop was open. Mike was already under a truck doing an inspection. Jess was in the office going through invoices. 2 of the younger guys were arguing about which tools someone had borrowed permanently. Normal. Comfortingly normal. For about 3 hours. Around 11:30, Jess walked out of the office holding her phone. Her expression told me something wasn't right. Did you authorize a credit check on the company? She asked. I looked up from the workbench. No. She frowned. Because Sarah just called. Sarah was our accountant. What did she say? Jess handed me the phone. Sarah's voice came through the speaker immediately. Please tell me you're sitting down. That depends, I said. What happened? There was a request this morning. For what? A credit evaluation. My stomach tightened. For the company? Yes. From who? Daniel. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. My brother? Yes. How would he even do that? He contacted the bank claiming he was about to become majority owner. I stared at the wall. What? Sarah continued. He asked about restructuring the company's credit lines. Jess' eyebrows shot up. He told them, Sarah said carefully, that the ownership paperwork was being finalized. For a second, I couldn't even speak. Daniel had tried to take control of the company's credit. Before he owned a single % of it. He doesn't own anything, I said slowly. I told them that. And they flagged the request. Good. But they also asked if there was some kind of internal dispute. Of course they did. Banks love stability. Family civil wars are the opposite of stability. No dispute, I said. Just a very stupid misunderstanding. Sarah sighed. I thought so. Did he get access to anything? No. Good. But you should probably talk to him. I already did. And let's just say he's not thinking clearly. Sarah paused. Well, she said, he's definitely thinking about money. Jess leaned closer to the phone. How bad would it be if someone like that actually got access to the accounts? She asked. Sarah didn't hesitate. Very bad. Then she added something else. The request he made wasn't small. I frowned. What do you mean? He asked about borrowing against the company. Jess' eyes widened. How much? Sarah hesitated. Then she said the number. 400,000. The office went completely quiet. He owes 200, Jess said slowly. Exactly, Sarah replied. Which meant Daniel wasn't just trying to cover his debt. He was trying to double it. Using my business as collateral. Thank you for calling, I said. I'll handle it. Please do, Sarah said. Then she hung up. Jess crossed her arms. So, your brother just tried to take out a $400,000 loan using your company. That appears to be the situation. Jess leaned back against the desk. Well, that escalated quickly. That was one way to put it. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I answered immediately. What the hell are you doing? I asked. What? You contacted my bank. There was a pause. Then he sighed. Oh, that. Yes. That. I was just asking questions. You told them you were about to become majority owner. That's the plan. No, it isn't. You're being stubborn. You tried to borrow $400,000. Hypothetically. There is nothing hypothetical about that. You're overreacting. I laughed. You tried to take a loan in my company's name. I was preparing for the future. What future? The one where you help your family. I rubbed my temples. Daniel, listen carefully. I am listening. If you contact my bank again pretending to be part of this company, I never said I was part of it. You told them you were about to own it. That's different. No, I said. It's not. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said something that made my blood run cold. Mom thinks you'll change your mind. She's wrong. We'll see. What does that mean? It means, he said calmly, this company exists because of family. That's not true. Your father helped you start it. With $5,000. And without him, you wouldn't have had the opportunity. That was the same argument my mother used. The family investment myth. A $5,000 loan turned into a permanent ownership claim. You're rewriting history, I said. No, he replied. I'm correcting it. Then he hung up. Jess had heard most of the conversation. Well, she said slowly. That was disturbing. That's one word for it. She walked back to the computer. I'm locking the bank accounts behind two-factor verification. Already thought of that. I know. She clicked through several screens. Also adding you as the only authorized contact. Good. Jess hesitated. Then she said something quietly. You might want to talk to a lawyer. I nodded. I already am. Because the reality was becoming very clear. Daniel wasn't just desperate. He was reckless. And reckless people with financial problems can cause a lot of damage if they think they have nothing left to lose. I spent the next 2 hours calling the bank, confirming security protocols, and documenting everything that had happened. By mid-afternoon, I thought maybe things had calmed down. Then Mike walked into the office. Boss. What now? There's a guy outside asking for Daniel. My stomach tightened again. What guy? Says he's looking for him. Who is he? Mike shrugged. Didn't say. Does he work here? Nope. Then why is he here? That's what I was wondering. I stood up. Let's find out. When we stepped outside, the man was leaning against a dark sedan near the curb. Late 30s. Suit jacket. Very serious expression. He looked more like a banker than a mechanic. Can I help you? I asked. He straightened up. Are you Daniel? No. I'm looking for Daniel. He doesn't work here. The man glanced at the building. This is his business address. My chest tightened. What? He pulled a folder from his briefcase. Daniel listed this company as a primary financial asset. Mike muttered something under his breath. What kind of asset? I asked. The man flipped through the folder. Collateral. And suddenly the situation became much worse. Because if Daniel had already started listing my company as collateral for something, then this wasn't just a stupid family plan anymore. It was fraud. And the people coming to collect were already starting to show up. The man looked at me again. So, he said calmly. Where can I find him? I stared at the man for a few seconds before answering. You can't, I said. His expression didn't change. Excuse me. He doesn't work here. The man looked past me at the shop. This is the address listed on the documents. Then the documents are wrong. He opened the folder again and flipped to another page. Daniel listed this business as his primary asset when he applied for restructuring. Mike let out a low whistle behind me. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. What exactly did he apply for? I asked. Debt restructuring. For how much? The man hesitated. Then he told me. $238,000. That number was close enough to the one Daniel had admitted to that it made my stomach turn. And he used this company as collateral? Yes. That's impossible. That's what I'm here to verify. The man finally extended his hand. Mark Reynolds, he said. Asset recovery consultant. I didn't shake it. Instead, I pointed at the building behind me. I own this company. He raised an eyebrow. You're the owner? Yes. Then Daniel's claim is interesting. That's one word for it. He studied my face carefully. Would you like to see what he submitted? Yes. He handed me the folder. Inside were copies of financial disclosure forms, loan documentation, and several pages that made my blood run cold. Because right there, printed clearly on the page, was the name of my company, listed as an owned asset, under Daniel's name. I felt anger rising in my chest. He doesn't own this company, I said. Mark nodded slowly. I suspected that might be the case. You suspected? These documents looked optimistic. That's a nice way of saying fraudulent. He didn't disagree. Technically, he said carefully, it's misrepresentation. I handed the folder back. What happens now? That depends. On what? Whether Daniel can repay the debt. And if he can't. Mark glanced at the shop again. Then creditors start looking for assets. Mike stepped forward slightly. You're not taking anything from here. Mark held up a hand. Relax. I'm not here to seize anything today. Good. I'm here to determine whether the assets he listed actually exist. They don't. Mark nodded once. That simplifies things. How? It means his creditors will be very interested in speaking with him again. That sounded like Daniel's problem, which was exactly where it belonged. Mark closed the folder. If you see him, he said, tell him to contact his lenders. Why? Because they're running out of patience. Then he turned and walked back to his car. Mike watched him leave. Well, he said, that was fun. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. That your brother's debt collector? Something like that. Mike shook his head. Family's complicated. That's one way to put it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange kind of tension. Like a storm had already started somewhere far away, and we were just waiting for the thunder to reach us. Around 6 o'clock, my phone rang again. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. What now? I said. Her voice came through sharp and angry. What did you do? About what? Daniel just called me. That doesn't narrow it down. He said someone from the bank showed up at his apartment. I leaned back in the chair. That sounds like a Daniel problem. You told them about the company. I told the truth. You humiliated him. He tried to use my business as collateral. He was desperate. That's not my responsibility. Her breathing grew heavier on the other end of the line. You're his brother. Yes. You're supposed to help him. Not by letting him steal my company. He wasn't stealing anything. He submitted documents claiming he owned it. That was just paperwork. That was fraud. There was a long pause. Then she said something quietly. You're going to regret treating your family like this. I closed my eyes. No, I said calmly. I'm going to regret not setting boundaries sooner. You're abandoning us. No, I replied. I'm protecting myself. Her voice hardened again. If your father were alive. Don't. She stopped. Don't use Dad to justify this, I said. Another long silence. Then she said something softer. You've changed. I thought about that. About the last 12 years. The late nights building the company. The risk. The responsibility. The employees who depended on the business staying stable. Yes, I said finally. I have. And then I hung up. That night, I sat alone in the office long after everyone had gone home. The shop was quiet. Tools put away. Lights dimmed. Just the low hum of the security system. I opened my laptop and started making changes. New passwords. New security protocols. Restricted access to financial systems. The next morning, I called a lawyer and began the process of documenting everything Daniel had done, just in case things escalated further. And then I did something else. Something that took me a long time to accept. I stopped answering my mother's calls. I stopped answering Daniel's messages. No more explanations. No more arguments. No more chances. Because sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that family can still be toxic. And when people start trying to take pieces of your life without permission, the healthiest thing you can do is close the door. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. The company survived. The employees stayed. Business continued. Daniel eventually disappeared from the situation once his creditors realized the company was never his to begin with. And my mother? She still tells people I abandoned the family. Maybe she believes that, but the truth is simpler. I didn't abandon anyone. I just refused to let them take what I built. And sometimes, that's the only way to keep your life from becoming someone else's collateral.